So in the past tutorial, we have now seen how to interact with YAG, and with YAG we have created actually already a job that is now stored in the database and also returned by the by our front end. But now, of course, we need some method to display this in our front end. So how can we do this? Okay, so first I will just give you some understanding of how to use React and React Bootstrap to create such a simple interface. Okay, so we will first create one job card. So one job card is will be created by a component. So we create a new component like this. So it's a function which will return some layout, some HTML. Actually, it's called JSX. This job card will, of course, need some data, and this data for now we will call it job, and in there all the data from one job will be stored. So each job card should receive one such object where all the data from the job is stored. So this will be then inside of job. Okay, so as I said, this component has to return some code. And it will be JSX. So always your JSX has to return just one element. There can be more elements inside of that, but we need to return just one thing. So it could return a div or just this empty thing. It doesn't really matter. Okay, I will just use it like this. So what do we want to do? Okay, we want to create a card. So this is why we will use the card component, which is provided by React Bootstrap. So to use this card component, we need to import it. Okay, so we will import card from React minus Bootstrap. Okay, so now we can use React the card component. Okay, what we want to have inside of the card is we want to have some body. And this body should contain a title. So here in the title, we want to actually display the title of the job. Okay, so now we go back here into YAG to check, okay, one job always has a title, and the key of this title field is just title. Okay, so what we can do now is we have to use those curly braces to display like a JavaScript variable, and we will type in the job. So this will refer to this variable. And we will say, okay, we want to get the title. Okay, so now this should already display the title. Maybe additionally, we could also add some text, so card.text. We want to display the salary. So maybe we will use the strong element, which is just a normal HTML element. And we will say the salary is some dollar amount, and then again the curly braces, because we now want to use this variable, and we can go from the job. And how do we get the job salary? So we can check here in YAG, and the salary is stored in a salary with the salary key. So we write again job.salary, and we need to make sure that it's actually a string, because here it's a so it's better if we also convert it to a string like this. Maybe we want to indicate that it's per year. And also what we will need is to have a break, so that after this a new line is created. Okay, maybe another thing that's also important inside our body would be a button, and this button should maybe be of class button. This is important for the Bootstrap styling, and it should be a primary button. Maybe it should, as a text, have apply now. So of course later we will add a on-click functionality, but this is not the goal for now. Okay, so we now have this. So now we have finished our job card component, and we can now use it actually in the list. So how can we create the list? Okay, so of course we want to get all the jobs from this endpoint. So we somehow need to call this endpoint to get all this data, store this data in some variable, and then go through all the elements in this list, and for each of those objects, create one job card. Okay, so the first thing is we want to create something to actually store this data. Okay, so in what you have learned in the quick start is the use state hook. So we will use that also here. So we will use create this jobs variable, and we will define the set jobs function to always set new job list. So this new state hook by default should be just the empty list. Okay, so what this basically says is that we want to have this jobs variable where we will store later the jobs or the jobs object. And by default, if we haven't changed it in any way, by default this jobs variable should be just the empty list. Okay, but here, of course, it says missing import statement because we haven't imported it. Okay, so what we want to do is to add a import to this use state, for this use state. So we will add use state and we import it from React because it's a React, it's a function provided by React. Okay, so now we have this, and next maybe we will create, I will paste into like helper states that will be also helpful for the loading and for the error. This will, by default, we store the state as being loading. So while it's loading, we will just display something like loading ... and a error where we can store any error messages that happen that we can then display also. So now we of course want to create a function that actually gets all the jobs from the database. Okay, so we will create an asynchronous function. Asynchronous is necessary because we'll use fetch to get something from an API, and all those API operations are always asynchronous. So we just put the async in front of the function. So we will create this fetch jobs function, and the main thing that we will do is we will get data from this endpoint. So it will copy this endpoint, and you will fetch from it. Oh, I didn't correctly copy it. So you will fetch from it, and it needs to be a string. Okay, so this is how you actually get the data. Here in front I have await, because fetch will of course send the request to the server. So it say, please get me this data, but the server will take some time. So to read out the database from the database, to properly format it, and then to send it back. So while the data is being prepared, we will just wait for it. Okay, so then we will maybe do some error handling. So if maybe the response is not okay, then we could throw a error, maybe which says fail to fetch jobs. But if it's okay, then we just continue, and we will get the data from the response. How do we get it? We convert it to a JSON, just like this. I have also shown this in the lab 8. Okay, and now we have the data, which actually contains all the jobs. So what you can imagine this data variable to look like is exactly like this. So it contains a list of objects. Okay, so what do we do with this data? We of course want to store this data in the jobs variable, because we later want to display it in the interface. So how do we set this jobs variable? It's important not to do this. This is wrong. You always need to use this set jobs function. So we will use this set jobs function, and we just want to set the data. Okay. And now that all of this is finished, we can then also set the loading state to false, because the loading now of course is finished. Okay, and because here errors could happen, for example this error that we throw here, or in the fetch also an error could happen, we put this into a try catch. So we copy all of this into a try, and in case there happens an error, we will catch it, and then we will handle it. Okay, so what we will do is we will set the error such that we can use this error maybe as a message in our interface. We will set it to error.message. And of course also the loading is finished because we have an error. Okay, so now we have this fetch jobs function. So how do we call it? The first maybe intuition of you would be to just write now here fetch jobs because you just want to call it. Okay, so the problem with this is this will be called too early. So this will be called while our website is still loading and rendering. So what we want to make sure that this only happens once the website has loaded and once we can actually change the interface. So we will use the use effect hook. You don't really have to understand it that much. What you will use it for is here you will write a function. So inside of here you will just write what you want to happen in the beginning of the website. So what we want to happen in the beginning of the website is in this case to fetch the jobs. On the other subpages, maybe in your project, you will want to fetch your applications. Okay, so we want to fetch the jobs, and here we just add the empty array. This is called the dependency array, if you want to read about it further, but you don't really have to understand it that much. Just remember, you will use use effect, and inside of this, you will have this arrow function, which calls fetch jobs, and here you have the empty array. So use effect now, of course, we also have to import it. That's why we add it here, use effect. Perfect. So next, we will display all the data that we have. So first we will maybe display what happens if everything works wonderfully. So in the normal case, we of course want to display the data from the jobs. Okay, so we will create like a grid-like layout. For this, I will combine rows and columns. So first I will use the row element, also from the Bootstrap. I will say that like on a small screen, we want to have one row. On a big screen, we want to have two rows. On a large screen, we want to have 3 columns. Those are the columns, of course. We'll also add some spacing, a gap or gutter, I don't know really, but it's called G-4. We have some spacing between the job cards data. Okay, so now we have this row layout where we will have either 1 column, 2 or 3 columns. And now inside of this, we will go over all the jobs. Okay, so we will use, we say jobs, and we want to map over that. So what this will do, this will create basically a for loop, and we can do something for every job. So it will call this function where we take the job, and we can then do something with it. Okay, so what do we do? What do we want to do with it? So we want to take the job and create a column with it, and inside of that, 1 card. So we will create a column. And every of those columns needs some key. What we use as the key is the job ID. It's perfect for that. We need to, of course, import the column. So we add here call. Perfect. Okay, and now what do you want to display in that? Okay, now we finally can add the job card. Okay, so we say job card. And we also need to pass in the job data as a prop. So I hope this you also remember from the quick start react.dev tutorial. So this is how you give the job card the job data. So you say, okay, job equal, and then in the squarely bracket, you say you give it to job, because here we are mapping over all the jobs. So always the job data for the first and the second, then all those jobs will be stored in job. And we give it like this. And then here in the job card will get it in this field, and it will be able to access the title, the salary, all those things. So now we have created the layout for the rows. But of course, we need to handle also the loading and the error state, because while it's loading, we cannot display this because we don't even have the jobs. So what do we add? Okay, so first of all, we will add if loading. And here we will return just a text that says loaded. So while this will be always updated, if any of those, for example, loading or error variables are changed. So in this case, if loading is true, then we will just display this. Okay. Otherwise, if error is true, then we will display that there was an error. So maybe we'll make it a bit larger because it's important. So maybe we'll say error loading jobs. And then, of course, we have the error message stored in the error variable and the error use state hook. So we can display it like this. Okay. And only if none of those things are true, then we will display the jobs. Okay, so now we save this. You need to make sure that your code is running. Maybe restart the server. Okay, and now you can visit this URL. So I have it already open here. I will reload it. And it doesn't work. We will check what's happening. Here, this is wrong. It needs to be imported from React. Okay, so let's check if it works now. Okay, so load failed. So let's check. Okay. I think the mistake that we made is here. We need to define that it's an HTTP location. Exactly. So always make sure that you say that it's HTTP. Okay, so now you see we have this one from the developer. And this is also exactly the data that we get here, right? It's from the developer and its salary 85,000. Okay, so now maybe if you would create additional things, so maybe backend developer with 55. Okay, so here we can confirm that we now have those two endpoints, and now we those two data points, and we also expect this to be here. So if we reload the web page, we now have the frontend and the backend developer. And to verify that also the layout correctly works, here you see it will be 3 columns on the large screen. On a small screen it will be 2, and on a very small screen it will be 1. Okay, so this is how you create, how you do fetch requests to a endpoint, and how you then load this data into React state variables, for example jobs, and then how you properly call it in the beginning of the website using useEffect, then how you manage loading and error states, and how you properly display the data, also like iterating through a list using the map variable. So map, you can also research how that works. It will basically just apply this function for each of the elements in the job list. So for each of the elements in the job list, we will create one such things. Okay, thank you.